Shalom and welcome to the Remnant Radio Show. This is the Alef Tav Remedy series. And today we are going to talk about why we would be crazy enough to home birth. Why home birth? And I have with me ATB practitioner and doula and midwife assistant, Carly Johnson. Shalom, Carly.
Shalom, Nitza. Great to be here.
Good to see you. We did talk about the story about my daughter-in-law's birth, the 5 days labor, etc. And just, this can just go on and on because there's so much to learn, so much to know. And fortunately, a lot of people don't know. They are deceived. If you're like me, you were deceived the first couple of times, right? Or the first time, or then Father just kept opening your eyes and showing you, and you're learning and learning. And I've always said for the last 38 years, the day will come that believers in general will not want to have their children within Pharaoh's system. And so I'm going to start here, and I'm just going to start out reading Exodus. And that's the other thing. We're getting ready for a second Exodus. It's going to be very bad and very uncomfortable, just like it was for the Israelites in the first. So that's the other reason, because the pattern's there. The difference in the pattern today is that they can track and control and manipulate us much more, because I think it is the trap. And, when it says to pray that you're counted worthy to escape, nobody can escape this. People have been trying to move out of the ranges of all this stuff for the last 30 years. And guess what? You can't go anywhere, because even in the high wilderness, if you don't think there's a tower there's drones. There's something everywhere to track you. And they've got it nailed down with smart dust and all kinds of stuff. So let's look at Exodus chapter 1, verse 8. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And I will say that applies basically for the house of Joseph and the house of Judah, really. Ephraim, Judah, etc. Just basically Father's people. And he said unto the people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we are. So they were reproducing. I'm going to give commentary. Well, unfortunately, believers, especially in this country, at least for the last 50 years that I know of, have been cultured and pressured and not believing that Yahweh creates and Yahweh provides. And we have been taught to be career women and not to have children and only to have one, or not only to have two, and it's just too expensive, instead of, wait a minute, Yahweh says he will provide for his people.
Yeah.
We can be a living sacrifice and let him decide our children and our families. Anyway, sorry, I might get off a few more here.
That's good.
Come on and let us deal with them, lest they multiply. Do they not have many ways to try to not let us multiply? And it came to pass that when they falleth out any war, they may join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore, they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them. And that word afflict, there is a not. It's the same word that we use a lot for Yom Kippur. It doesn't really mean to fast. It means to fall flat on your face, humble yourself. There's that old tune, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord. That's really what it means, just right. And so the enemy likes to do that too. And we, our Heavenly Father wants us to do that because we want to, we want to fall forward and worship him. Mm-hmm. So let's see. They came to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasures and cities. I want to point out, he's using Yahweh's people to build his treasures, build up his treasures in his cities, which is exactly what we see today. So they set over the taskmasters, and they afflicted them more and more, and they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. I'd like to break that word down in ancient Hebrew. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, in mortar and in brick, and in all manner service in the field, and all their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, which father, thank you for the midwives that we have, of which the name of the one is Shiphrah and the other was Puah. And he said, when you do the office of midwife, Alef Tav is there, by the way, the Hebrew women see them upon the stools, and if it be a boy, a son, then you shall kill them. But if it be a daughter, you shall let her live. So you're commanded to murder right there, right? Seriously. But the midwives feared Yahweh, Alef Tav, and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved Alef Tav, the men children alive. And the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said unto them, why have you done this thing? Have you saved Alef Tav, the children men of Israel, alive? And the midwife said unto the Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivering, and the midwives come in unto them, and they're already. In other words, they're saying, well, it is probably true. I mean, they were rigorous. They didn't have a lot of choice or time to lay around, right? And that was probably a good reason, a good excuse. I don't think they just lied. I think it was probably very much the truth. And hey, if I couldn't get there on time, then I can't get there on time. But anyway, therefore, Yahweh dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mightily. You know, and a lot of people sometimes will go through the whole thing about the difference between murder and killing and lying. And, you know, I think throughout Scripture, we can see that, you know, lying in order, this is probably upset people, lying in order to save a life sometimes is the remedy. You know, if you're think of people right now who are living and dying and being assaulted in Iran and different countries around the world, and even like during the German war with Hitler, you know, that was something. So we're going to talk about home births, and I wish we could just talk about all the lovely, great reasons why, without having to address the reasons why we have today that we didn't used to have, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it was just
worse for, I mean, in ways it's gotten better.
Yeah.
Because they didn't just, in the 50s, women just came in, they gave them twilight sleep, literally knocked them out, extracted the baby. They were alone in a sterile room. Husbands weren't allowed in. So we've gotten a lot better, but in ways post-COVID, it's gotten worse with, you know, autonomy and practitioners really being able to provide the care that each woman deserves.
Right. Yeah, there's lots of wonderful reasons to home birth, but then through the years it was to avoid Pharaoh's system and all the things they actually do to you, even when you have miscarriages that you're not aware of, what they do with the cell tissues, and yet they charge you for that at the same time. I can tell you nightmares, which we'll probably do on the next show when we get into home birth stories. But and then, you know, since 2020, we have lots of reasons that have to do with the things that started happening and everything that we're dealing with today with weaponized pathogens, nanotech, et cetera. And maybe before we get into more reasons why, talk a little bit about infertility rate.
Yes, the ability to be able to get pregnant and have babies has been really under attack, more so than we've ever seen in the last 6 years, but, you know, and long before that, but it's really ramped up since then, for sure.
Well, one way was the mind control and the culture and the training that the world, you know, believers in general took on the world's attitude about having children. You know, like we didn't act like children were a blessing, and we were blocking having them, and people didn't want to, you know, they wanted to have sex before marriage. And, you know, there's all these reasons and things for material things. And man, I could go there. I mean, we could look at one place in Florida, like the biggest senior citizen community there is probably in the country. It takes up several counties. And I can remember when it was just starting out and just going to, as a homeschooler, going to a theater with your children in the middle of the day, you know, because sometimes there were educational things that we could go see and have the older people complain, right? But then they built their own city, and then they didn't allow children in. And a lot of times I would see those women especially be sad and want to see or talk to our children. But, you know, they had done the American thing. They made all this money and then went down and retired, and they're not near or around their children or their grandchildren. So there was this whole mindset against, you know, children, having a blessing, trusting the Father, for
Yes.
provision. And then we see the opposite side. We have the secular world who kind of pretty much, they're going to kill themselves out with their choices of whatever gender they want. They're not going to reproduce anyway. But
Right.
I will warn you, they will force us to have their children as surrogates. You wait. You just wait. And then, of course, we have the other religion that's taking over the world by force.
Mm-hmm.
And they know you're going to get it with numbers. And if you're killing them off and sacrificing their lives for everything, right, you got to produce a lot of children. And so very few people, I saw it big in the homeschool movement for the last 30, 40 years. It was, no, we are taking back the scriptures. We are raising children. We are raising arrows. We are raising people to rise up against the enemy, spiritually and physically, to spiritually take down the strongholds of the enemy. But you know what? You can't spiritually increase in warfare if you don't physically increase, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. There's strength in numbers and, raising our children in an alternative way. And I said that to my oldest son the other day. I said, you guys are going to carry on what this generation has started. You guys are going to carry that forward, because I think we get in this mentality, especially in, our modern Christian culture, where we think it's just going to be a snap of the fingers and everything's going to be made right. And really that's kind of a cop-out, because it really is up to us in a lot of ways to choose righteousness, to choose to trust the Father with our fertility, to choose to continue to expand our family, and that was a big part of our journey too, having years of infertility and then being able to have more children. And we have 6 now. We have 3, and then 7 years later we had 3 more. But it's a leap of faith, and it's also a choice to really, how do we want to live? Do we want to live by the world system? Do we want to live by the culture of the world that's told us that children are a burden and they need to go be away from us all day and, just outsource? Or do we want to live the way that's more of a alternative to our culture, and dying to yourself? Because when you do have a lot of children at home, I'm in that season now. You and I will laugh about this sometimes, but you don't really get a whole lot of breaks, and you have very full days, and staying home with your children, you're sacrificing a second income, but it's worth it. It's worth it to go outside of the system, Pharaoh's system, right? And do things the way that we feel like Yah has laid out for us in his word.
But you're also raising producers, people who are going to contribute to society and community in ways that we can't even begin to imagine. So again, the enemy likes to have us look not at what we are putting out there, but he knows how powerful it is and what we're doing and raising. And even today, I remember 30, 40 years ago, I don't want to bring any children into this world. It's just too bad. And oh my gosh, is it not so much worse, right? As we're decaying and getting closer to the return of the Messiah. But it's like, that's exactly, and I had a young person come to me lately and say, I've always wanted to have children, but I feel guilty for bringing them into this world. And I'm like, don't you take that bait.
Yeah.
That you're going to have to operate and put your faith into action and trust. This is where it comes with trust. This is where the rubber hits the road. He will provide. He might not provide the way you want with, a couple of cars and a big house, a summer home or anything like that. But, and we have to really think, what is that blessing? Those intangible things that you are storing in heaven and you're doing. And even with you miscarriage, that child had a purpose and did something in your life or someone else's life. And I can tell you stories, babies born without a brain, and hundreds of people coming because of the faith of the parents, because of that child, and it lived longer than normal. And just like, it was amazing at what it did in the spirit of people. And so, so there we are. And then, we have had more and more infertility problems, which a lot of that had to do with birth control. And gosh, I was out of the circus for a long time, and I've been with some young women who are telling me, and they're suffering from having these different, I'll let you talk more about them, kind of like in my old days, it was like an IUD. But now they have these contraptions that they put in your body, but it's causing all of these other health problems. And these women are struggling for their lives and having to pay to undo it and still, get well. And so we have all of that that's been going on, lack of nutrition, lack of good, solid food to build up the body so that we can be fertile. And then, with all those complications, then comes in 2020.
Right.
And now more and more women and families are not being able to conceive. And if and when they do, the miscarriage rate is so much higher, even amongst those who have not embarked with the program of 2020. Because the transmission, just put it this way, if 75% of the world, gets that thing where they get to embrace nanotech, weaponized pathogens, et cetera, and transmitters within their body, and then it's in our food and our water and everything else, we're all getting affected and we're suffering because of them. And yet they say, we're going to make them suffer, right?
Right.
So anyway, I'll let you take it from there, and then let's get into some reasons why we don't want to home birth. I mean, we do want to home birth, why we don't want to go into the system, right?
Yes, yes. Well, and again, like you were saying,
we have a choice, but let's put our disclaimer out there.
Yes. We are not medical doctors. We're not here to give any medical advice. We're here just offering wisdom from what we've learned, what we've seen, and just the things that the Father has put on our heart that we've learned through experience, through the Holy Spirit. So we are not giving any medical advice or telling you what to do, but seeing the trajectory of where our society has come. And like you said, this infertility thing began way before. I mean, if you want to go all the way back to, like the women's rights movement and feminism, it was really about destroying the family, because family is where we learn love. It's where we experience supernatural love. From the moment you give birth to your baby to watching them grow and, working with your spouse to raise them, it's walking out that love, right? It's not the feeling of it, it's the action of love. And so I think that's why the enemy has really had it out for fertility and for families for a long time. And, we were saying before we came on camera, I grew up in like the 90s and early 2000s where birth control was just the norm. If you our parents, they did the best they knew how to do, but right after we started cycling, a few years into that, we were told, take them to the gynecologist, right? Go to the gynecologist so they can make sure they're good.
Yeah.
And then, it was an epidemic when I was young of women having painful cramps, these girls having painful periods, excessive periods. And so then what happens? You go to the gynecologist and the system, and they say, oh, we can give you a pill for that. We can put your daughter on birth control, and this will fix the problem, not realizing that causes hormone issues for years after.
And maybe all she needed was to quit drinking tea or coffee or caffeine and taking magnesium food and drinks.
Exactly. And I remember even back then, not having any good nutritional background, my parents were basically, lived by the standard American diet. But I remember the months I think I read somewhere, if you drink a lot of water, it'll make it easier. And I remember the months that I would start my cycle and I would purpose myself to drink more water, I would do better. Who knew, right? Something simple as staying hydrated. But, it's been really an attack on the unborn, on the ability for women to give birth for a long, long time. There's nothing new under the sun. There's just new methods of doing it, clever ways and tricks that they've gotten women to partner with.
If you think about it, I mean, who needs to, make you go get an abortion if we can just talk you out of having children?
Exactly. Yeah. Or cause so many problems. I mean, I've known women over the years that were on birth control in their teens and early 20s. And then by the time they get married, mid 20s, and want to have children, they can't. Their fertility is shot from years of being on that toxic stuff that messes up their entire body. And
which is also may cause cancer. I mean, there's so many issues. I mean, you could spend an hour or two on each one of these little tiny things we're bringing up.
Yes. I mean, really, but the overarching message of fertility, if we're talking about that, is just to trust the Father, to get back to creation, to get back to how we're made, and to avoid the pharmakia as much as possible on your journey to get pregnant, trusting the Father,
Right.
good, clean, nutritious food, and getting what you need. I always find it helpful, especially now that I'm a little bit older. Before I had my last baby, and I knew we were going to try to get pregnant again, I took a month to just really eat clean. I did a week long. I made sure I did a parasite cleanse and all these things. And of course, now we have ATB and, I have my laser and I have my patches and all these other amazing tools that I have at my disposal. But I remember wanting to clean out my temple to make sure, okay, it would be good for me to do a detox, a reset. I worked with my friend who's another practitioner, and I did like some modalities just to make sure my body was ready and clean to be able to, receive life and be able to carry life. And again, we have to trust the Father with that too. I've had losses before, and really what I learned through so much of our infertility journey was fabrics. And Nitsa, I know you're big on this. You've talked about this for years, but another thing that women have been duped into believing is that we need to work out, right? We need to work out. We need to go to the gym. We need to do these hardcore kickboxing, 50 lunges, all these exercises. And I remember during that time, I was in that mode. I was going to the gym. I was teaching classes. I'm wearing this spandex plastic clothing, that you wear when you go to the gym. And the Holy Spirit really started showing me, this isn't what you want to do if you want to get pregnant. And I had a friend actually at the time who was a master herbalist, and I was teaching kind of like a kickboxing class. And she came to my class and she just said to me, she knew we were trying to get pregnant, having a hard time. And she said to me afterwards, this isn't the kind of thing I'd do if I wanted to get pregnant. Because what happens is women, when we are running, which I've totally changed my mind on all that. I really don't think we're meant to run, women. That signals to our body danger, time of war, get away from the lion. Our body is not going to our hormones are going to shift from being in rest and digest, create life, to fight or flight. And so when we're doing things like that, when we're working out too hard, when we're pushing our body to try to look a certain way, again, the way we've been programmed by society, that we have to have flat stomachs and we have to, it's completely unrealistic. It's against our design. So realizing all of that, and oh my goodness, it's so much more than just staying out of pharmakia. It's how we treat our bodies. Are we taking things slow? Are we pushing ourselves too hard? And women who do work, it's stressful. You're getting up early, you're pushing yourself physically, when really we were designed to be resting and at home. Obviously doing the work around the house is plenty of a workout. Laundry and dishes and
walking with the children, this is not
the best exercise for our bodies.
Whatever.
We were taught that that's what grandmas do to work out. They walk, do this, do that. And so, that whole fertility journey is really just looking at how do we get back to the Father's ways? How do we get back to the way we were made to live? And I found incredible healing, realizing some of those things, and stepping outside of that and going back into wearing linen, wearing organic fabrics, cotton fabrics. I did use some herbs and some good detoxes and cleanses, but at the same time, I wasn't fasting like crazy, because again, that would signal to my body it's not safe to get pregnant. So
let me address the fabric thing here for a minute, because a lot of people. I was teaching on linen and light in 2004, 5, 6, and 7. Everyone thought I was a wackadoodle, which I still am. But, and it's now with the new movement in the last, 5, 7 years, I see it revamping through especially the Torah movement.
Yes.
And I have, by the way, on remnantremedy.com, you can go into the radio archives, and I have all kinds of stuff on linen from early 2000s and anyway. So, but one of the things, a lot of people quote the frequencies. Don't get me on the bandwagon about that, but
right.
Really not all about that. And I actually did a show about that. And there's so much behind that. But what you really need to do is understand that the number one way that your cells communicating your body from cell to cell to send information, et cetera, is electrical via the nervous system, right? We are light beings, literally. And so the second way our body communicates mostly from cell to cell is with the hormones. So what's the big deal about linen, or what's the big deal about cotton or wool and not mixing and putting on all these artificial synthetic fibers. And I will tell you, there was a time and a period that I had 100% linen, everything, including the thread, underclothes, overclothes. And I lived in Northwest Montana, so I layered, let me tell you. And I had a full wardrobe, and I wore it for years, and I learned a lot of spiritual applications to that. But the main reason overall is, if you have any of these things, and this is actually what got me started on linen, was static. I lived in Northwest Montana where it's dry. And if I got in my car, got out of my car, I got electrocuted. If I went to the grocery store and opened one of the freezer doors or something, I got electrocuted so bad I would start having other people do it for me. So what happened was, I started, Father was just speaking about light. And so I'm pulling up all these things about light. And before Esor, when I had to use a concordance and do pages and pages of notes. And so basically the bottom line in a nutshell is, your cells need to communicate. You need to create an atmosphere around your body, an environment for your body, for your cells and your electrical system, your light system, to be able to communicate and move freely, which affects all these different organs. And if you're into ATB, for the cycles and the body points, etc., that energetic light energy that Father put in us needs to communicate. Mm-hmm. And if you have static, if you've created static all over with your artificial plastic shoes and your plastic synthetic, cloths, etc. Now this is probably more synthetic because you can't get really good colors on natural. You can't get all kinds of pretty colors with the natural fibers all the way. But that's the main reason, is so that, your body, if you're in 100% wool, 100% cotton, or cotton linen, plant to plant, or alpaca, something like that, that's natural, is you're allowing your body that environment to communicate and live and function the way it was created to. I've had women come up to me when I was teaching on linen at Sukkot and places like that, who, after they listened to me, came up to me and said, I had a headache, and I thought about what you said, and all I did was go take off my scarf, because a lot of them wear scarves, especially up in the Northwest, and I put on a cotton scarf or a linen scarf. And they said, my headache went away. And I'm like, amazing. Yes. And if you want a scriptural reference to that, think about the priest or the Kohen who were carrying the Ark of the Covenant.
Yes.
It was so they wouldn't sweat. It would wick away from them. Because if you were dealing with the Ark of the Covenant, it was like a transformer or a battery, whichever guys want to argue about that. It was powerful, right? And if you mishandled it and you weren't grounded in your bare feet or et cetera, whatever, when you didn't follow those rules, you'd get your behind zapped and you would be dead.
That's right.
So, go on.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's wonderful. And, just even talking about the whole fabrics and the natural fabrics, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, in another episode, but I just attended a home birth a few days ago. And it was sort of a last minute thing. They basically went to the hospital, realized we don't want to be here.
Oh, yes.
And turned and went back home and had a home birth. And it was incredible. And the one thing that we were laughing about afterwards, because they had their first baby in the hospital, and then the second baby, he was born at home, beautiful home birth. The husband was like, that was crazy. That was such a mess, right? It's such a mess. And I said, well, yeah, when you go to the hospital, and I've attended hospital births as a doula, they are not my favorite, but again, what do you want, right? It is a very sterile, clean environment. Everybody's got gloves. They're changing their gloves. You're under all this disposable plastic stuff, and then they just ball it up and throw it away. So it's very sterile, neat. And I got to thinking about that the other day, and I thought, how much has that trashed our environment? It's filling with microplastics. And so at this home birth I was at the other day, we just had a bunch of cotton towels, and we put the towels down on the ground, and we're sopping up the blood with the towels, and we're washing things, and the baby's meconium and all that. And I laughed afterwards because we ended up soaking the towels twice in the tub. And then we ended up throwing them in the washer. And I said, well, if your towels don't make it, guys, I'm sorry. So I saw them the other day, and her husband said, yeah, we pulled them out of the dryer. We're like, looks good to you. Looks good to me. Let's put them away. But what a difference, right? What a difference. The bags of trash. And again, microplastics that are destroying the environment, destroying the arets, we're putting more of this junk back into the environment. And I think it's very telling. And very much a parallel about what's happened in women's bodies. Okay.
Yeah.
If we want to go into the whole feminine, masculine words in Hebrew, right? Aretz is feminine. And so we have this connection with women and the earth. And I'm not saying it's this new age Mother Earth thing, but we see the male counterpart and the female counterpart. And I think there's so many parallels in what has been done to birth and women through Pharaoh's system compared to a home birth that, we're using what's already there. We're using reusable things. I have a sweet friend. I think she's had her 4th or 5th baby now at home, free birth. Mostly it's just her and her husband. Her last one, some midwives attended because she had suffered a horrible loss just days before she had her last baby. And so they wanted to be there as a community of women to support her, which is what midwives are for. It's a community. It's love. It's, nurture. It's what is your want for this birth? But she laughed telling me the story because they don't have anything disposable in their house. I mean, they're very much
Right.
reuse everything. And so she said when the midwives came, she told them, here's my stipulation. Don't you put those gloves on your hands. Don't you try to put that plastic drop cloth under me. I don't want any of it. And so they basically just watched her give birth to her last baby and pick the baby up. And they just stood back to see, if there was any concern. And I think for me, again, attending births at the hospital versus at home, training under an amazing midwife, having my 6 babies at home. What I love about midwifery care is midwives are observers. They're observing what's happening in your body, what the needs are, and then they jump in as needed. Whereas if you go to a hospital birth, you are immediately treated as an emergency. You're immediately treated as if the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Something we were talking about. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, first of all, doctors, and you can research this. There'll be a lot of people tell you this. Of course, they might get upset about it, but they are trained to do surgery.
Drugs and surgery.
To intervene. And the new midwives that we've had in the last 20 years just upsets me so much because they're not, in my opinion, true midwives. No. They are midwives that have been put in the same protocol system to make it easier for the doctor. And it's the same thing you would have got just with the doctor. It just makes it easier. They can charge more and they're going to treat you the same. It's not going to change. A true midwife is trained in the art of childbirth.
Yes.
And, all these things that probably would have happened and made a C-section doesn't happen most of the time because they know what to do or how to position. They don't have a golf game to go to.
Yep.
They don't have this schedule to, maintain. Their husbands, their wives, their children, they all are in that ministry together because they support her from home with prayer while she goes out and can work, in our last case, 4 or 5 days. Okay, but usually it's not that long. But truly, you're going to get much better care, much more knowledge in the art of childbirth, even when it comes to nursing, etc., with nursing mothers, live birthing mothers, natural birthing mothers, than you're going to get with your lactation specialists and your midwives at the hospitals that are trained through nursing. Now, I think there are good ones out there, but the mindset's still the same. Yeah. And we have really good midwives who purposely still do some things that I would never want to have done. And for instance, you can talk about this, what goes in the eye, maybe the vitamin K, yes. Different things like that. Those are reasons why I don't. But to be licensed or to do whatever they do in certain states, and then we have ministry midwives who aren't licensed. I found out with my midwife, I just looked at her and said, I don't want that. And she just looked at me because, she can be sued so easy. And it's usually grandparents or somebody else in the family or a friend. It's not the couple that's doing it. It's like, I just found out, and I tell people there's a waiver. Yes. Ask your midwife, is there a waiver I can sign? Because I don't want those things injected or poured into or taken out from my baby. Yeah. Anyway, so go on.
No, and that's a really good point. And Dr. Andrew Kaufman, he's been really speaking out a lot about staying out of the hospital system. And he was a medical doctor. I think he was in the ER. I'm not sure, but he worked as a medical doctor in the hospital for years. And he has come out on several podcasts. He was on the Weston A podcast, Weston A Price podcast a few years ago. And the episode was called Stay Out of the Hospital. And he
Oh,
basically talked about the legal forms that you sign. And he had said how they get you is you come in for an emergency or a birth in this case, and they say, sign these forms, sign these forms. I was at a hospital birth recently, and it was stomach turning. She is in the middle of transition, getting ready to push her baby out. All her focus, all her attention is just groaning through these contractions. And they're shoving an iPad in her face, shoving an iPad. We need you to sign this. We need you to sign this. And she has no idea what she's signing. And
right.
in reality, what Dr. Kaufman has been talking about, what a lot of people are realizing is you are signing away your body parts, your placenta, your baby's stem cells, your blood. I was at a hospital birth where as soon as that baby came out, I watched somebody hand the doctor a giant needle. He drew a giant syringe of the blood out, handed it back. And I'm just thinking, how do they have consent to do this? And what are they doing with that blood? And as a
Because you
believer,
basically sign, you can do anything and everything that you think is deemed responsible, even on a regular doctor visit, right?
right. And as a people who are trying to follow the righteous instructions of our Father and keep Torah, we have to be really careful in that area because the life is in the blood. Blood is sacred. The other nations that were destroyed before the Father, right? Before, so the Israelites could take over, is because they were doing things with blood. They were not just mixing seed, but they were doing blood sacrifices. They were doing rituals. They were doing abhorrent things. And I think what most people don't realize, in just our modern world, is that the same thing is happening. There's nothing new under the sun. They have guised it under medical care and said that this is necessary, that we're running tests, we're doing this, but they are still taking that.
Yes.
And your blood is speaking, and they're doing things with it that you may not want. So that is, to me, a huge reason for a believer or someone trying to keep Torah to stay out of the system.
Yeah. And I will share that next week. I think we're going to talk about birth stories next week, but they charge you for your miscarriage, D&C, and the different things that they take from your body for their medical lab. They charge you for that, and then they turn around and sell it, and it ends up in your cosmetic products. And then it might say, oh, not tested on animals. Well, it's interesting that the science community considers humans to be animals until we need to sell something, and then it's not tested on animals. No, they didn't tell you it was humans, but hey, we got good stem cell products, right? Anyway, yeah, that's back to the 70s and 80s, trying to key into that, and I'll shut up for now.
No, that's a really good point. And again, they have made it so these systems are automated.
Yeah.
That when you go in to have a hospital birth, these things are being done to you so quickly. And to me, that's the stark difference from attending and being a part of a home birth to a hospital birth. It's so fast. They take the baby, they cut the cord almost immediately. They take the blood, they stitch you up if you need stitched up, which a lot of the time you do because you're on your back giving birth, which is not conducive for
in the hospital, right?
Yes, in the hospital. And it's all cleaned up, sterilized over. I mean, that doctor is maybe in there for the last 15 minutes. And
some doctors don't bother to tell you. They're just going to automatically cut you and give you an episiotomy anyway. And don't think you might not have problems from that later, from the scar tissue.
From the scar tissue.
It may affect a lot of things in your life. Ask me how I know. But yeah, and then that blood transfusion and oxygen still needs to keep coming to that baby from the umbilical cord. And you don't just cut it right away. There's something, and then not coming through the birth canal and ending up in a C-section. Well, now you're not getting all that good bacteria and all the things that happen as you're going through the birth canal and getting those probiotics, prebiotics, whatever you want to call them, and then pushing the lungs. And there's a purpose for the pain. And if you can get that, then you can get a purpose spiritually for what we're going through and what we're going to be going through for the greater Exodus. I want to be around people who have home birthed.
Yes, because they're
taking care of a real butthead and a real bullhead and a goat or a bull, because it's reality. I did a show years ago. Actually, I did teach in a congregation, and that's all I was basically talking about. And YouTube pulled it off for pornography. So yeah,
My goodness.
let's talk, you know, yeah. So
Yeah. Well, that's a good point too. Just how high the C-section rate is. And it was so interesting to hear Kim talk about that last week about how in Brazil, 90% C-section rate.
mhm.
And, from what I learned training under the midwife that taught me was not only do they get that good beneficial bacteria, do they get, all of those things, but when they go through the birth canal, it squeezes the baby's head in a way that jumpstarts their brain. It kind of creates more of that vascularity, the blood flow there, and it kind of like switches their brain on from being inside to outside. And there was a story that I read in a home birth kind of magazine article about a woman that had done midwifery in the bush in Africa. And then she came over as a nurse to intern in the US, and she saw her first C-section. And when they just pulled the baby out, she panicked and went and immediately started squeezing the baby's head because she instinctually knew, like, oh my goodness, their brain didn't get the jump start they needed, because that's a natural part of the process. And so, you're really, when you're going into that system, especially now, and again, not that y'all can't.
Yeah, he's bigger than that. If that's where you end up, he's bigger than that.
True emergency. Yes, absolutely. Trust the Father, but you really have no autonomy. You lose all autonomy. You're basically going in to what feels like a concentration camp. And it's like, sit down, you're going to do this. Well, we have to do this. We have to do this. And again, this couple that I was with a few days ago, I was so proud of them because they were so brave. They were trying to be fear mongered into 4 hours of IV antibiotics just in case, which she knew she didn't want. And all these other things they try to throw at you, well, your baby could die. Well, this, well, that. And they knew because they had done their research. They knew in their heart this wasn't right. And they stood up to them and they were able to leave the hospital and go home. That outcome doesn't always happen.
No.
Sometimes I've heard many times people have been held hostage there against their will. And then systematically, okay, this is taking long. Maybe we should break your water. Maybe let's give you a little Pitocin. Okay, baby's not ready to come and you're forcing the baby out. Okay, this isn't progressing fast enough. Oh, baby's heart rate, we're worried about baby's heart rate. Boom, you're at a C-section. And so it is a system. It is a system of control. And it's very hard to get what you want and to get the normal natural processes that you would get in having a home birth inside the system.
Well, it's important to remember, and I want to make this very clear. I don't care if you are having a home birth or a hospital birth. You better make sure that your number one trust is in Elohim.
Amen.
Personally, because of what I've been through and the botches that have happened to me in the medical field and with my children and with myself, and what I've had to learn the hard way is I'd rather be in the middle of a desert with just me and Yah, sick or giving birth, because I know what he can do. And I know there's not somebody else there to screw it up, to try to, in my life or my child's life, and do things that we will have to pay for years and years to come.
Yes.
That you can't take back.
Yes.
And so there's the opposite out there. Most people are like, you're absolutely insane to have that idea or that concept or to think that way. And they do. They have fear and they've been brainwashed and they don't even really realize it. But Father does take his own and he does start showing them. And a lot of times it does cost us along the way. We go back and look at that and go, yeah, but he was merciful. It could have been much worse. We did listen. We did trust, because that's usually what happened. Who do you trust more? Do you trust man or you trust Yahweh? And that's exactly what it took for the Israelites. And to be honest with you, probably the Egyptians weren't going to take him in and treat him any better. And we pretty much have that today. In fact, if you come through those doors spiritually, sometimes it comes right out of their mouth. But spiritually, when they know who you are in the spirit, they will purposely come for you and that child in ways to deceive you and harm you.
Yeah.
So Anyway.
Yeah. And again, you know, the things that they do that are completely unnecessary, like the whole eye ointment thing. I mean, if there is a mother who's been stuck in prostitution and has a slew of STDs, I understand. But to give every baby that eye ointment that can cause damage and even in some rare cases blindness, why? Why would you do that when we have natural biological processes that Yah puts there, the vernix that's on their skin, you know, the good bacteria they get from going through the vaginal canal. You know, the first thing they see when they're looking, it should be their mother's face. It shouldn't be this eye ointment that's smeared on with these plastic gloves. You know, another way they really get mothers is the vitamin K shot.
Right.
Which is not vitamin K, by the way, as we know. It actually has a black box warning. If you ask them to read the label, they don't even know where the label is. They can't even tell you what's in it, but they will tell you that you have to have it. But a black box warning means can cause instant death.
Well, so what they tell you, they give you the vitamin K to stop bleeding, right? Well, because they're going to prick the child and pull blood, which is really not necessary. Do a thyroid panel. But here's the thing. Yahweh created the baby so that on the 8th day, their vitamin K kicked in, right?
Yes.
And so if you are going to do a circumcision, that's one of the reasons to wait at least 8 days, right?
Yes.
So you stop and think about it. Do you think Yahweh was that stupid that he created us, that we needed all of this intervention? And what happened for the last 6,000 years and what happens around the world? Sometimes I like other third world countries much better when it comes to stuff like this, because they don't do all that. It's a natural process of life and they don't interfere, and they truly use Pharaoh's system only when they have to.
Yeah. And what are the repercussions that we're suffering from that as a society, right? 1 in every 3 children has some type of allergy, skin issue, you know, autoimmune disorders are skyrocketing, autism rates are skyrocketing. And it's because of all of these interventions.
And we're not even talking about all the little pointy things they want to put in your baby. And I mean, I watched it, you know, my first child was in 1986. I watched it change from maybe 6 shots in a few years to, oh my gosh, how many are there? Like 30, 40 something shots. And, you know, just from an understanding of the immune system, et cetera. We're not even talking about that. We're not even going to go there, really. Okay.
Right. Let's set that aside. Even that, all the other things we've done.
Okay. And then to add to this, we got, since 2020, nanotechnology, weaponized pathogens, and things that they use in and around you and the child that is harming them and or has repercussions, and to you, the mom, and to whoever's there. We're not even going to talk about that. We're going to put it on the side, right? Yes. We don't have to go that far, but that is all that much more reason if you once you're awake to what's going on there. So let's, you know, go back to that bonding. You know, the pheromones. So babies who are held by their siblings, and of course mom and dad, actually there's this energetic spirit ruach thing that's happening in the pheromones and the smell, whether you're conscious of it or not. And those people who hold and have access first to that baby have more bonding and relationship and emotional relationship to that. And we won't even talk about nursing. Nursing in and of itself is, it helps with the mouth development and the brain development. You know, we're not talking about the nutrition of it. And the thing that's sad is, and I don't want to beat anybody up over the head for this, but you know, if you can nurse your child, you have no idea emotionally, spiritually, physically what that does for your child. And if for any reason you do or don't or stop, and you go to the bottle, right, then hold the child there at the same eye distance, hold them and feed them with that bottle.
Make eye contact, touch their cheek, touch their face, because that looking to bond
affects them for years and years to come in their brain development. And Father gave me a vision after one of my children about that. And basically, without going into detail, I was trying to feed my child and I couldn't because I was one of those ones that's very difficult. Like the first 14 days of nursing is like childbirth to me. It's just so hard. But I didn't give up. And it's worth it a million times over if you don't. But I was crying one day because like, my baby's starving and I'm trying to feed it. And Father was just like, I'm like this every day. The great El Shaddai, which means the many-breasted one, the one who has more than enough to provide for us. He goes, I'm trying to feed my children the true milk every day, and they don't want it. Well, then they go to the bottle. Well, if it's expressed milk, okay, it's still good, but that bottle's not that same intimacy. And then what do? You start putting artificial milk in there.
Yeah.
It's all about the word. It's, there's just this whole spiritual application that it's just like, oh my gosh,
Yes. What's that scripture? Like newborns crave rich spiritual milk, right? Which is the word of Yah. I think Paul talks about that. And yeah, that has spoken to me so many times. Just that rich spiritual milk that comes right from the Father, in this case, with us, the mother. But yeah, I mean, so many things, they've taken Yah's amazing design, every detail, and twisted it and perverted it and made it about separation and made it about control and pharmakia and taking blood. And what we were saying too before we got on camera with this birth the other day, I've never had Pitocin after a baby's been born. I've never had, bleeding or any excess issues. Now, I know some midwives will carry Pitocin with them, but at the hospital, I have not seen a single mother be able to decline Pitocin. And if they try, they will come in and say, well, you could bleed out. And here's why. Like you said, Nitsa, the first person that should touch that baby is loving arms, loving hands and arms. So me, the father, the siblings, whatever. And what happens in the hospital is most of the time, to make sure everything's okay, that baby is cut quickly, whisked away from mama while she's being cleaned up and sterilized because the doctor wants to get in and out 15 minutes. Whereas if you look at the counter at a home birth, immediately mama gets to hold baby. And what's that doing? That's releasing oxytocin. Pitocin is just synthetic oxytocin. They've taken this beautiful biological process and created an artificial version. Again, same the formula, right? So not knocking anybody that has to do that. There are great homemade formula recipes. I've supplemented babies before with raw goat's milk formula.
Right, which is the next best thing too.
Yes, but we would just, hold the baby, nurse the baby, have complete access unrestricted to our baby, which is silly that we have to even ask for that. But in a hospital, you do. Guess what? That oxytocin stops the bleeding, helps shrink the uterus, helps bond mama and baby, helps tell the body to start making milk in the next few days. It's all perfect. And I like to say, birth is the space where heaven invades earth. It is a supernatural encounter with the Most High because life is being born into this realm of existence. We're the vessel. We get to be the vessel. And our job is just to get out of the way. Now, again, there's room for medical emergencies, and you have wisdom and you trust the Ruach with that, right? But we just have to get out of the way. And unfortunately, what we've seen in Pharaoh's system is they've taken all of that under control and under the pharmakia. And, we've lost that supernatural encounter.
Which, by the way, us old timers, when we were home birthing and non midwives, they didn't carry Pitocin. They carried liquid chlorophyll.
Yes, we use chlorophyll a lot. Cayenne pepper.
Full of vitamin K, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
All those things. And, now that we have ATB therapy, right to remain, if somebody's bleeding out, how powerful would it be if we as women, as a support system, and you were saying this last episode too, when Kim was on, that it's really about a system of mothers and sisters coming alongside and building this community. Midwife means to be with woman, to be with a woman in her time of travail. And instead, the option that's given to most people, and sadly enough, because of our insurance system, people are pigeonholed into that because they can't afford, or they think they can't afford a midwife, which is not true. A lot of times midwives will work with you and do payment plans or even do an exchange. I mean, I've done exchanges with people for births. I got 2 goats one time because that's all they had. And they said, will you take these 2 little goats and help us with our home birth? It's absolutely right. That's the joy of getting to be with women. It's a messy, beautiful, incredible privilege. And the more we can get back to that And again, leaning on the wisdom of mothers who've come before, who've attended a lot of births. I mean, that's all midwives were back then. They didn't go to a school. They didn't have a piece of paper. They weren't certified through a government organization. They just had experience and knowledge, and they trusted the Father and listened to the Ruach.
There's a lot of prayer and intercession. I mean, maybe there's some secular home births, but there are, other foreign gods. But for the most part, I think that the mainstream of home birthing is a spiritual, Bible-based group of people. Well, we have to go today, but we will be back next week. And I think that you and I will share our births. Yes. I have 5 living children. That means I lost 2. And I was infertile for 10 years. Lost one, had one, lost one, 10 more years. Had 2 more at old age at 41 and 43. So there's a lot I learned, and I have an adopted child in the middle. So, and I know that you have a lot to share because that's how you learn, is get into a community, find your local midwives, and usually they have birthing, lactation, they have meetings and people share and at least the ones here too. It's not just home birth. You can come to those meetings and know that you're going to have a hospital birth, etc. So, just be with more like-minded people. And that's really where you learn. That's where you learn the real, you really want a mother that's nursed to help you with nursing. You don't want just a doctor or whatever, somebody come along. So anyway.
Can we even say how gross it is that most OBs are male? Like for me, with my first baby, that was one of my primary reasons, is I did not want a man trying to coach me through something he could never even come close to understand. Out of modesty, I don't want a man to see, my body in that way. So I think it's very bizarre also that the system has mostly male doctors delivering babies. Let's just get back to women helping women, right?
All right. Well, thank you. And we will now get ready to go. May your garments always be white. May your head lack no shimon. Shalom.
If you missed today's show or want to watch it again or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lambnetwork.tv, where you will find this show and all other live Lamb Show archives in the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell somebody about the Messianic Lamb Network.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.